The Vrelian High Council gathered in their great chamber within hours of the disaster. The room was enormous, built from living coral that glowed with soft bioluminescent light. Hundreds of Vrelians floated in the air, held up by their technology, all focused on the center of the chamber. There, wrapped in medical equipment, was Ambassador Krelvia. He was alive but damaged. His mind had been shattered by less than 1 second of contact with human consciousness. Even through the telepathic barriers that protected him, the other Vrelians could feel his pain radiating outward like heat from a fire. High Curator Dalshan spoke first. She was ancient by Vrelian standards, nearly 400 years old. She had guided her people through wars, plagues, and disasters, but nothing had prepared her for this. Ambassador Krelvia, can you tell us what you experienced? Krelvia's voice was hollow and broken. Madness. Beautiful, terrible madness. We need more details, Science Curator Veshanal said gently. The collective must understand what happened. Krelvia shuddered. I touched Captain Dewan's mind for less than a second. In that moment, I experienced what felt like years of impossible thoughts. The human mind is not like anything we have ever encountered. It does not follow any rules we understand. Trade Coordinator Miskral leaned forward. But we have met chaotic species before. The Brenthian hive minds were difficult to understand at first. The Kelvin Gestalt entities thought in ways that confused us. We learned to communicate with them. No, Krelvia said firmly. Those species were different, yes, but their minds still made sense eventually. They thought in strange ways, but they thought according to logical principles. Humans do not think logically at all. Their minds are full of contradictions that should destroy them, but somehow they function anyway. High Curator Dalshan tilted her head. Explain what you mean. Krelvia closed his eyes, forcing himself to remember. Captain Dewan appeared calm on the surface. Professional, controlled. But beneath that thin layer I felt a hurricane of competing thoughts. He was eager to meet us and terrified of us at the same time.
He trusted us and suspected us.
He thought in pictures and abstract concepts simultaneously. He believed things that contradicted each other without any distress. That is impossible, Security Marshal Trevenak stated. A mind cannot hold opposite beliefs without breaking. Human minds can, Krelvia replied. And they do it constantly. It is their natural state. While I was connected to Captain Dewan, I saw his memories. This man has spent his entire life thinking contradictory thoughts. He has made decisions based purely on emotion, and then created logical explanations afterward to justify them. He has believed things he knew were false simply because he wanted them to be true. All humans do this. All the time, the council chamber fell silent. The idea was too alien to easily accept. Junior Curator Halvin spoke up. She was young, barely 60 years old, and her voice held skepticism. Perhaps you were simply overwhelmed by the strangeness of first contact. Even experienced telepaths can be confused by, I saw his violence, Krelvia interrupted. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire chamber. Deep in his memory, I saw humanity's history. They created weapons that could destroy their own planet. They used those weapons on each other. They fought wars that killed millions over ideas, over beliefs, over resources they did not even need. They committed genocide with industrial efficiency. They were creative and compassionate, and then they weaponized those same qualities. He opened his eyes, and they reflected something the Vrelians had no word for, a mixture of awe and disgust. Captain Dewan has killed people, not in self-defense, not to protect his hive, but for something he calls duty. He has nightmares about the beings he killed. He feels guilt that tears at his mind. But if the same situation happened again, he would kill again. He believes what he did was wrong and right at the same time. He is traumatized by his actions and proud of them. This is a normal human. Trade Coordinator Miskral shifted uncomfortably. We have dealt with aggressive species before. The Karax wanted to conquer. The Drell loved violence. We found ways to live with them. Those species were aggressive, but their aggression was simple, Krelvia explained. A Karax wants territory, so it takes territory. Cause and effect. But humans? Humans will die for strangers they have never met. They will sacrifice themselves for abstract ideas. They create art about their own suffering. They find meaning in meaninglessness. They can feel deep empathy and casual cruelty in the same breath. They are apex predators who tamed other predators and kept them as pets. They are every contradiction that evolution should have eliminated. Yet they survived. They thrived. High Curator Dalshan raised a hand for silence. We must decide what to do about Earth. Security Marshal Trevenak responded immediately. Quarantine. Complete isolation until we develop proper safety protocols. The risk to our telepaths alone justifies this. That would destroy our relationship with humanity before it begins. Diplomatic liaison Kiresh argued. They did nothing wrong. They are not responsible for how their minds work. But they are dangerous, Veshanal said. Not deliberately, but functionally. If simple diplomatic contact can shatter our most experienced telepath, what happens when humans try to join the galactic community? How many of our people will be harmed? Junior Curator Halvin spoke again. We are approaching this incorrectly. Yes, humans are cognitively alien to us. Yes, contact with their minds is dangerous. But they are also intelligent, technologically advanced, and capable of rational behavior despite their internal chaos. We should ask how to integrate them safely, not whether to isolate them completely. You suggest treating them like the Luminari? Trade Coordinator Miskrall asked. Establishing protocols and protective measures? Exactly, Halvin confirmed. The Luminari emit dangerous psychic radiation, but we have maintained diplomatic relations with them for generations through proper precautions. Humans are simply cognitively radioactive. Krelvia made a sound that might have been a laugh. You still do not understand. The Luminari are dangerous because of what they emit. Humans are dangerous because of what they are. Every memory in Captain Daywan's mind, every thought, every story, all wrapped in layers of contradictory narrative. Humans do not just think in paradoxes. They are paradoxes. And the worst part? They do not even know it. They think they are rational. They believe they make sense. The debate continued for hours. Voices rose and fell. Arguments were made and countered. But in the end, the decision was nearly unanimous. Establish a quarantine around Earth's solar system. Restrict all telepathic contact with humans. Form a special committee to study the problem of human consciousness. Only Junior Curator Halvin voted against it. This is a mistake, she said. Fear is making us act too quickly. Yes, humans are different. Yes, they are dangerous to telepaths. But they are also potentially valuable allies. By isolating them, we guarantee they will develop independently. In a century, maybe two, they will advance enough to break any quarantine we create. And when they do, they will remember that we imprisoned them out of fear. Then let us hope. Security Marshal Trevnak replied coldly, that a century gives us time to prepare for that day. As the council broke up, Krelvia remained in his medical suspension field. His mind kept returning to what he had seen in Captain Daywan's consciousness, that swirling chaos of contradiction, the way the human stood there looking calm while his mind screamed with 1,000 conflicting thoughts. He remembered the last thing he had glimpsed before his mind broke. A memory of young Daywan standing in a bombed city, holding a dying child while simultaneously calling for artillery strikes on the enemy position that had killed her. The human had been crying and shouting coordinates at the same time. That image captured the horror of human consciousness better than words ever could. They were monsters and saints simultaneously. Killers and protectors. Rational and irrational. Logical and emotional. All at once, all the time, without any internal conflict about the contradictions. Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Daywan stood before his own leaders and delivered his report. The emergency meeting included representatives from every nation. They listened in growing disbelief as he explained what had happened. The Vrelian ambassador collapsed after less than 1 second of telepathic contact with my mind, Daywan said. They are calling it a massive neural cascade failure. Since then, the Vrelians have recalled their diplomatic vessel and declared our solar system under quarantine. Quarantine? Defense Minister Kyung-soo repeated angrily. They are treating us like a disease. Dr. Hana activated her tablet. Based on my scans and communications with Vrelian doctors, Ambassador Krelvia experienced severe psychological trauma simply from touching Captain Daywan's consciousness. The Vrelians claim human thought patterns are fundamentally incompatible with telepathic contact. Secretary General Park Ji-won looked troubled. This is unacceptable. We followed every protocol. We did nothing wrong. And now we are being isolated from the galaxy because of how we think? Professor Min, the government's chief expert on alien psychology, spoke up. Did the Vrelians know this might happen? Their curator mentioned being warned by other species. Dr. Hana pulled up data on the MII. 3 months had passed since the quarantine began. Junior Curator Halvin floated in the observation post at the edge of Earth's solar system, staring at screens that showed her nothing useful. The humans had not tried to break through the barrier. They had not fired weapons. They had not even sent angry messages. They had simply continued living. Radio signals flowed across their planet. Spaceships launched and landed at their orbital stations. The world turned through its seasons. If the humans were bothered by being trapped, they were not showing it. Somehow this made Halvin more nervous than aggression would have. Still nothing? Research Monitor Pelvin asked as he entered the chamber. He was young for a Vrelian, barely 60 years old, but 3 months of studying humanity had already worn him down. The automated probes show normal patterns, Halvin confirmed. Agriculture, industry, regular communications. If they are angry about the quarantine, they are hiding it well, or planning something we cannot detect. Pelvin pulled up data displays. Human launches to space have increased by 47% since the quarantine. Their deep space observations have tripled. Their scientists are having extensive discussions about faster-than-light physics. They are curious beings trapped in their own system, Halvin said. Of course they are looking outward, or preparing to break free. Halvin dimmed her lights in frustration. This was the problem with the collective's response. Everyone saw threats. Nobody saw opportunities. Even if they developed faster-than-light travel, it would take them decades. We would have plenty of warning. Unless they advance unpredictably, Pelvin countered. Human technological development does not follow normal curves. They make intuitive leaps. One of their scientists called it thinking outside the box. Look at their history. They went from basic flight to landing on their moon in 66 years. From splitting atoms to nuclear power in a decade. They do not advance steadily. They jump. Halvin could not argue with that. She had spent months studying human databases captured during first contact. Humans did not solve problems normally. They redefined them. They found solutions through methods that seemed more like art than science. You sound like you admire them, she observed. Pelvin's lights flickered with confusion. I fear them and am fascinated by them equally. Is that not appropriate? Before Halvin could answer, an alert sounded through the chamber. Both Vrelians turned their attention to the sensor data. A human vessel, Pelvin announced. Small single-pilot craft. It is approaching the quarantine boundary. Weapons, none detected. Actually, it is broadcasting on all frequencies. The pilot is requesting communication. Halvin felt anticipation pulse through her. The collective's orders were clear about no contact with humans. But observation and communication were technically different things. Let me hear it. A face appeared in the holographic projection. A human female, perhaps in her 30s. She had short dark hair and direct eyes that held no fear. Vrelian observation post, this is Dr. Sujin of the Earth Diplomatic Corps, the human said in surprisingly good Vrelian language. I am requesting permission to approach and speak with whoever is in charge. I am unarmed, and I promise not to think too loudly. The last part seemed to be a joke. Halvin had learned that humans used humor even in serious situations. Especially in serious situations. This is Junior Curator Halvin, she responded. You know that this system is under quarantine? Very aware, Dr. Sujin replied. That is why I am here. Humanity is really bad at being ignored. We need to talk. The collective's position is clear. Telepathic contact with humans poses unacceptable risk to your telepaths, yes, I know. But I am not asking for telepathic contact. I'm asking for conversation. Two beings separated by space and shielding, using the old method called talking. No mind-touching required. Pelvin's lights flickered alarm. Junior Curator, I must protest. The quarantine protocols say nothing about verbal communication, Halvin interrupted. She had studied those protocols extensively, looking for openings. This might be one. Dr. Sujin, what do you wish to discuss? The fact that you trapped my entire species in our solar system because we gave one of your ambassadors a psychological crisis. We did not trap humanity, Halvin replied, her lights showing slight offense. The quarantine is a protective measure, for you, not for us, Sujin cut in. Let us be honest. Your collective found out that humans are mentally toxic to telepaths, and instead of working on a solution, you decided to wall us off. That is not protection. That is imprisonment. Your thoughts cause psychological harm to telepathic beings. Would you prefer we continue making contact until we have traumatized an entire generation? I would prefer, Sujin said evenly, that you treat us like a problem to be solved rather than a threat to be contained. But I'm not here to argue. I am here to propose a solution. Despite knowing better, Halvin felt curiosity pulse through her. I am listening. The human gestured and a data packet appeared in the communication stream. I am sending research my team has been working on for 3 months. It is a theoretical framework for telepathic interfacing with human consciousness. The trick is not to dive in like your ambassador did. That is like sticking your hand in spinning machinery. Instead, you need buffer protocols, cognitive filters, and gradual contact. Pelvin was already analyzing the data. This is surprisingly sophisticated. Where did you learn our telepathic biology? We are very good at reverse engineering things, Sujin replied. And you left a lot of sensor data behind when you evacuated your diplomatic vessel. Also, Ambassador Krelvia left biological samples when he collapsed. We have been busy. Halvin felt a chill. You have been studying our telepathic biology without permission? You have been studying humanity since before you made first contact, Sujin countered. We found your stealth probes in our system. All 17 of them. Do not pretend this is one-sided. The human had a point, though Halvin was reluctant to admit it. Even if your protocols have merit, the collective will never approve testing them. Not after what happened to Ambassador Krelvia. Which is why I am not asking the collective, Sujin said. I am asking you. Me? You voted against the quarantine. Your objection is public record. We intercepted that transmission. You think the collective's approach is wrong. You have more experience with non-Vrelian species than anyone watching humanity. That makes you qualified to evaluate my proposal. And potentially test it? Halvin asked, understanding dawning. If you are willing, I am not a telepath, but I have spent 3 months working with human test subjects to understand what makes our cognition so disturbing to telepathic species. I think I know how to make it safer. Less chaotic. You cannot change how humans think, Pelvin interjected. No, Sujin agreed. But I can change how that thinking is presented to a telepathic observer. Imagine your telepathy is vision, and human consciousness is a strobe light. You cannot change the strobe, but you can give yourself protective lenses. Halvin considered this. The metaphor was crude but not wrong. What you propose could take years of research to validate, and it would require approval from the High Council. Or, Sujin said quietly, it could take a few minutes and require only the courage of one curator who thinks humanity deserves better than a cage. The implication was clear. Halvin felt her lights cycle through colors showing deep conflict. What Sujin suggested would violate protocols, potentially damage her career, and might cause her the same trauma that had shattered Krelvia. But it might also be humanity's only chance to break free before their isolation became permanent. If I agree to this, Halvin said slowly, and if it fails, I will likely experience severe psychological trauma. Yes, Sujin acknowledged without hesitation. You might end up like Krelvia, or worse, and if it succeeds, then you will have proof that humans and telepaths can coexist safely. You will be able to present evidence to your collective. You will give both our species a chance. Why are you doing this? Halvin asked. Surely there are safer approaches. Sujin's expression grew sad. Because Captain Daewon has not spoken to anyone since the incident. He blames himself for traumatizing your ambassador. He thinks his mind made him a weapon against innocent beings. A man who dedicated his life to bringing species together now believes he is poison. I am doing this so he knows it was not his fault. So he knows humans are not monsters. We are just different, and different should not mean dangerous. Halvin made her decision. Pelvin, note in the log that I am conducting authorized research on human telepathic interface protocols. Strictly observational. Pelvin's lights flashed alarm. Junior Curator, that is not— Note it, Halvin repeated firmly. Then to Sujin, transmit your protocols. I will review them. If they seem sound, we will proceed with a controlled test. Thank you, the human said simply. As Halvin began downloading the research data, Pelvin spoke quietly. This is madness, perhaps, Halvin agreed. But the humans have a saying about fortune favoring the bold. Let us test if that applies to xenopsychology. The protocols were indeed sophisticated, more so than Halvin had expected. Dr. Sujin had clearly worked with talented advisors. The framework proposed gradual interface increasing in depth over multiple sessions, with cognitive filters limiting information. 6 months after first contact, the Vrelian High Council gathered again. This time, Junior Curator Halvin stood in the center of the chamber. her lights bright with determination despite the weight of hundreds of critical stares directed at her. "Your report," High Curator Dalshan said without warmth, "has caused significant disruption within the collective." "My report," Halvin replied evenly, "demonstrates that telepathic contact with humans is manageable with proper protocols. The quarantine is therefore unnecessary and counterproductive." Security Marshal Trevenak's lights flashed angry red. "One successful test does not invalidate established danger. Ambassador Krelvia remains in medical suspension, still recovering from psychological trauma. Your experiment proves nothing except your own recklessness." "My experiment proves that we overreacted," Halvin countered. "Yes, unfiltered contact with human consciousness is dangerous. So we use filters. We develop protocols. We train our telepaths. We adapt. Something the collective claims to value but seems increasingly unable to practice." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Direct challenge to collective policy was rare, especially from one as junior as Halvin. "You exceeded your authority," Trade Coordinator Miscaral stated coldly. "You made contact without approval. You exposed yourself to risk for what amounts to political theater." "I exposed myself to risk," Halvin agreed, "to prove that humanity deserves better than imprisonment. And it is working. Since I released my data, 17 research teams have requested permission to replicate my results. 12 diplomatic offices have filed inquiries about resuming contact with Earth. The collective's own scientists are validating Dr. Sujin's protocols. The evidence is mounting that..." An alarm cut through the chamber. Not the gentle chime of standard notifications, but the harsh pulse of emergency broadcast. Every Vrelian present turned attention to the priority signal that had just overridden council proceedings. A holographic projection appeared. A star map showing the galactic arm where Earth resided, and approaching Earth's solar system from the galactic core was a fleet signature that made every light in the chamber flare with alarm. "The Kazathi," Science Curator Veshnal breathed. "A raiding fleet, heading directly for Earth." Halvin felt her entire consciousness recoil. The Kazathi were not part of the Vrelian collective. They were the reason the collective maintained defensive forces at all. A predatory species that viewed all other beings as either prey or competition. The Kazathi had been growing bolder in recent years, testing collective boundaries. And now they were heading toward an isolated, primitive species that had no idea they were coming. "Fleet composition?" High Curator Dalshan demanded. 17 vessels," Military Coordinator Shendar reported. "Mix of cruisers and assault carriers. More than sufficient to overwhelm Earth's primitive orbital defenses." "Why Earth?" someone asked. "What value does a quarantine system have?" "Resources," Veshanal replied grimly. "Population for forced labor. Earth is relatively defenseless, isolated from collective protection by our own decree, and rich in biological diversity. To the Kazathi, it is a perfect target. We must intervene," Halvin said immediately. "Dispatch defensive forces." "We cannot," Security Marshal Trevenak cut her off. "The quarantine prohibits collective vessels from entering the solar system. We established that boundary for our own protection. Then we changed the policy." Halvin's lights flared bright white with outrage. "We cannot let an entire species be enslaved or exterminated because of our fear." "The Kazathi fleet will reach Earth in 73 hours, Shendar reported. "Even if we dispatched vessels now, they would not arrive in time. The quarantine boundary stations are scientific outposts, not military installations. They lack firepower to engage a Kazathi raiding force." The council chamber fell silent as the implications settled over them like ash. The Vrelian collective, through its own policy of isolation, had rendered humanity defenseless against an existential threat. "We must at least warn them," Diplomatic Liaison Kiresh said. "Give them time to prepare." "Prepare how?" Trevenak asked bitterly. "Their weapons are primitive. Their spacecraft can barely reach their own orbital facilities. What preparation can they make in 73 hours? "More than they can make in 0 hours, Halvin snapped. "Send the warning now." High Curator Dalshan's lights dimmed to near darkness, a sign of profound internal conflict. "Transmit warning to Earth, priority channel. Include all tactical data on Kazathi fleet composition and capabilities. It is the least we can do." "It is not enough," Halvin said. "We created this situation. We are responsible." "We cannot fight the Kazathi over Earth," Trevenak stated. "The collective's defensive doctrine clearly states..." "I am aware of doctrine," Dalshan interrupted quietly. "I helped write it. But the curator is correct. We bear responsibility for humanity's vulnerability. Our fear made them prey. She straightened, her lights brightening with decision. I am authorizing emergency protocols. Dispatch the 3rd Defensive Fleet to the solar system, with orders to intercept the Kazathi raiders. We will deal with quarantine complications after we have prevented genocide. High Curator. The risk to our telepaths, Trevnak began, is acceptable under these circumstances, Dalshan finished firmly. We will not stand by while an entire species is destroyed because we were afraid of their thoughts. Council is dismissed. Military Coordinator, execute fleet orders immediately. As the assembly dispersed in organized chaos, Halvin remained in the center of the chamber. 73 hours. The 3rd Fleet might not arrive before the Kazathi did. And even if they arrived in time, would it be enough? She thought of Dr. Su-Jin, of her bravery in proposing the interface protocols. She thought of Captain Day-Wan, still carrying guilt for something that was not his fault. She thought of the billions of humans on Earth, living their contradictory, impossible lives, completely unaware that death was approaching from the stars. Curator Halvin. Pelvin's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Priority transmission from Earth. Dr. Su-Jin is requesting contact with you specifically. Halvin hurried to the communications array. Su-Jin's face appeared, and even through the holographic projection, the human's fear was evident. We got your warning, Su-Jin said without preamble. The Secretary General is convening emergency sessions. But Curator, we cannot fight this. Our weapons are not designed for space combat. Our ships are exploratory vessels. We have maybe 24 combat-capable spacecraft, and they are armed with missiles designed for planetary defense, not fleet actions. The collective is sending forces, Halvin replied. The 3rd Fleet is en route. Will they arrive in time? Halvin's lights flickered uncertainty. I do not know. The human took a shaky breath. Then we are on our own for at least the initial engagement. We need to buy time. Keep the Kazathi occupied until your fleet arrives. With what? Your technology is centuries behind theirs. With what we have, Su-Jin said grimly, and with what we are good at being unpredictable. These Kazathi raiders, are they telepathic? No. They are actually resistant to psychic powers, which makes them dangerous to... Halvin stopped as understanding dawned. You cannot be serious. You said human consciousness is toxic to telepaths. What about to psychic sensors? The Kazathi must use some form of mental awareness in combat, even if they are not full telepaths. They do use limited psychic targeting, Halvin confirmed slowly. But Doctor, there is no evidence that human cognition affects non-telepathic species the same way. Then this will be an experiment, Su-Jin replied. Look, we are going to die anyway if we do not try something. Might as well make it interesting. Despite the dire situation, Halvin felt something that might have been admiration. This was very human, facing overwhelming odds with improvisation and dark humor. What do you need from me? She asked. Technical specifications on Kazathi psychic sensors. Their frequency ranges, filtering protocols, anything that might help us broadcast at them. If human thoughts can break a Vrelian telepath, maybe we can at least give them a headache. That is an insane plan. You have a better one? Halvin did not. She began transmitting every piece of technical data the collective had on Kazathi neural architecture. This is everything we know. But Doctor, even if you can disrupt their targeting systems, you still need to actually damage their ships. And your weapons, leave that to us, Su-Jin interrupted. We have been working on some modifications. Turns out when you are trapped in your own system with nothing to do, you get creative with your military research and development. We may not have your technology, but we have something the Kazathi have never encountered before. Human desperation mixed with human ingenuity. That combination has a pretty good track record. 73 hours, Halvin reminded her. Then I had better get started. Curator? Su-Jin's expression softened slightly. Thank you. For the warning. For fighting for us in your council. For seeing us as more than monsters. You were never monsters, Halvin replied. Just different. May fortune favor you, Dr. Su-Jin. Fortune favors the bold, Su-Jin replied with a grim smile. And nobody is bolder than a human with nothing left to lose. The transmission ended. Halvin stared at empty space. Around her, the observation post had transformed into a military coordination center, as collective forces prepared for possible combat. But the Kazathi fleet entered Earth's solar system exactly 73 hours after the Vrelian warning. 17 massive warships, each bristling with weapons designed to conquer worlds. They had done this hundreds of times before. Attack a primitive species, overwhelm their defenses, take what they wanted. Simple, efficient, brutal. Commander Rathzek stood on the bridge of the lead cruiser, his scaled hands gripping the command console. His psychic awareness spread through the fleet, coordinating movements with his subordinate captains. The Xathi were not true telepaths like the Vrelians, but they possessed enough psychic sensitivity to share tactical data mentally. It made them formidable in combat. Targets acquired, his weapons officer reported. 24 primitive vessels in defensive formation around the third planet, armed with chemical propulsion missiles. No energy weapons detected. Rathzek felt contempt pulse through his mind. This would be easier than expected. Begin assault. Disable their vessels but preserve the infrastructure. We want the planet intact for resource extraction. The fleet advanced. Their psychic network hummed with shared purpose, each captain knowing instinctively what the others were doing. This coordination was their strength. While other species needed verbal communication or electronic systems that could be jammed, the Xathi shared minds directly. Then something went wrong. As the fleet closed within weapons range of the human vessels, Rathzek felt a sensation he had never experienced before. Static. Noise. Not in his hearing or vision, but in his psychic awareness. Like trying to see through rippling water. What is that? His tactical officer hissed, clutching his head. My targeting sense is disrupted. Rathzek reached out with his psychic awareness, trying to lock onto the human vessels for precision targeting. Instead, he encountered chaos. Not the emptiness of psychic shielding or the organized resistance of telepathic defenses. This was something else entirely. Contradictory signals that made no sense. Thoughts that should not be able to exist together existing anyway. It was like looking at an optical illusion that hurt to perceive. Focus, Rathzek commanded. They are using some kind of psychic jamming. Push through it. But pushing through made it worse. The closer the Xathi focused their psychic senses on the human vessels, the more confused those senses became. Targeting locks flickered and failed. Coordination between ships became difficult as the psychic network filled with incomprehensible noise. On the human flagship, Captain Dewan watched the Xathi fleet slow its advance. The plan was working. Barely. Psychic broadcast is holding steady, Dr. Sujin reported from her station. We are channeling consciousness patterns from 300 volunteer crew members directly at their fleet. Based on the Vrelian data, their psychic sensors should be experiencing significant interference. Should be? Commander Tejo asked nervously. This is all theoretical, Sujin admitted. But look at their formation. They are supposed to be coordinating perfectly, according to Vrelian intelligence. Instead, they are bunching up, making mistakes. We are getting into their heads without even trying. Day one felt a grim satisfaction. For months he had believed his consciousness was a weapon that harmed innocents. Now he was learning it could be a weapon that protected them. All vessels prepare to engage. Target their lead cruiser. Concentrate fire. The human ships opened fire. Their missiles were primitive compared to Xathi technology, but they had been modified. Human engineers, given months of isolation with nothing to do but innovate, had made improvements. Chemical propulsion enhanced with experimental plasma drives, warheads redesigned for maximum kinetic impact, guidance systems that used old-fashioned cameras instead of psychic targeting. The missiles streaked through space. The Xathi point defense systems should have shot them all down easily, but the psychic targeting was compromised, and the automated backup systems were not fast enough. Half the missiles got through. Explosions blossomed across the lead Xathi cruiser's hull. Armor buckled. Systems failed. The ship began listing, venting atmosphere. Rathzek snarled in fury and confusion. How were these primitives hurting him? His fleet had energy shields, advanced armor, weapons that could crack planets. Yet somehow these chemical rockets were breaking through. All ships spread formation, he commanded through the psychic network. But the network was still filled with that incomprehensible noise. His orders reached his captains, but they were delayed, garbled. Ships moved in different directions, breaking formation further. They are in disarray, Lieutenant Yunji reported from Tactical. The psychic jamming is working better than we hoped. Their coordination is falling apart. Press the advantage, Daewon ordered. All ships focus fire on the damaged cruiser. Bring it down. More missiles launched. More explosions. The lead Xathi cruiser's shields collapsed entirely. One final salvo of human missiles struck the ship's reactor section. The cruiser exploded in a brilliant flash of light. On the Kazathi flagship, Rathzek felt rage and something he rarely experienced. Fear. One of his ships was destroyed. By primitives. By beings who should not have been able to scratch his paint, let alone kill his warriors. What are these creatures? His weapons officer demanded, his psychic presence radiating confusion. Rathzek reached out again with his psychic awareness, trying to understand what he was facing. He touched the consciousness of the humans aboard their vessels. Just a brief contact to gauge their mental state. What he found nearly broke him. The humans were terrified. They knew they were outmatched. They knew they should not be able to win this fight. But they were fighting anyway, and inside their minds, Rathzek sensed the same contradictions that were jamming his fleet's targeting. Fear and courage existing together, desperation and hope intertwined, logic and emotion merged into something that should not be possible. They believed they were going to die and believed they were going to win at the exact same time. It was madness. But it was functional madness. Weaponized madness. Retreat, Rathzek ordered suddenly. Pull back to maximum weapons range. Commander? His tactical officer stared at him in disbelief. We still have 16 ships. They have 24 primitive vessels. We can overwhelm them. No, Rathzek replied, his psychic presence showing a certainty he did not fully understand. We cannot. There is something wrong with these beings. Their minds are weapons. Retreat now, or we will lose more ships trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. The Kazathi fleet began to withdraw, maintaining long-range fire but no longer closing for the killing blow. Their missiles and energy weapons were still more advanced than anything humanity possessed, but without coordinated targeting, their accuracy was poor. The human vessels took damage, but they held formation. Aboard the observation post at the edge of the system, Halvin watched the battle unfold with growing amazement. The humans were doing it. They were actually holding off a Xathi raiding fleet through nothing but cognitive chaos and desperate innovation. The third fleet is still 6 hours away, Pelvin reported. Can the humans last that long? Halvin studied the tactical display. Several human vessels were badly damaged. They were running low on missiles. The Xathi were regrouping, trying to adapt to the psychic interference. It would be close. Signal the human fleet, she ordered. Tell them help is coming. Tell them to hold on. The message was transmitted. On the human flagship, Captain Daywan received it and allowed himself a small smile. 6 hours, he announced to his crew. We just need to survive 6 more hours. We have enough missiles for maybe 3 more volleys, Commander Tejo reported. After that, we will have to resort to ramming. Then we ram, Daywan said simply. Whatever it takes. Dr. Sujin looked at him from her station. The psychic broadcast is taking a toll on the volunteer crew. Channeling consciousness this intensely is exhausting them. Some are already unconscious. Rotate them out, Daywan ordered. Bring in fresh volunteers. We need to maintain that jamming effect. The battle continued. The Xathi tried new tactics, attempting to use their superior speed to flank the human formation. But every time they closed, the psychic interference intensified. Human minds were more effective at close range, it seemed. The contradiction and chaos that made up human consciousness became overwhelming when concentrated. The Kazathi lost another ship to a lucky missile strike. Then another when 2 cruisers collided due to coordination failure. Rathzek watched his fleet falling apart and felt something he had never felt before in combat. Respect for his enemy. These humans were not stronger or more advanced, but they were using their very weakness as a weapon. The Vrelian Collective quarantined these beings, his science officer reported, reviewing intelligence data. They deemed human consciousness dangerous to telepathic species. They were right, Rathzek replied grimly. These creatures are cognitive poison. Beautiful, terrible poison. He made a decision. Signal retreat. Full withdrawal from this system. We are leaving. Commander, we have not taken any resources. We have not even landed assault forces. The raid is incomplete. The raid is over, Rathzek stated firmly. We attacked prey that turned out to be predators. We learned a valuable lesson. Some species are not worth conquering, no matter how primitive they appear. The humans are one of them.